Anna. That's
Okay.
probably it. I mean, that's a lot of information. So I'm like, okay, I should probably stop.
I feel like even I'm not a parent myself, but I still learn a lot from this session.
I
Yeah,
just,
especially like myself, like some of,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I think that these are things that we can work on our entire life. I mean, I still feel anxious. I still have anxious moments where my thoughts come in and I have to really go, oh, hi, high stress, high worry, high fear, okay, I got you. Thanks for thinking of me. I've gotta move forward to what I need to do. So, yeah, but I know I threw a lot of information out. And so, hope it wasn't like, hope it was okay.
Um, so I collected some questions now.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So there is some more specific situation about listeners and their kids.
Okay.
So first I wanted to just cover like the most um,
Like
general
general.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
sure.
like three people asked that do you recommend any podcast, or like can you list the book that you mentioned
Oh,
before again, like a
definitely.
book,
Oh,
yeah,
sure, sure, sure.
and yeah, podcast lists, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this book, Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, I love this book. It's very simple to read, and it basically breaks down, the process of anxiety and the steps that you can take. I've read this book through so many times. It's so dog-eared at this point. So this is Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents by Lynn Lyons and Reed Wilson. And then Lynn Lyons and her sister-in-law Robin have a podcast called Fluster Clucks, and it's all about working with kids and teens during the pandemic. I highly recommend it. It's really enjoyable, and they're pretty fun to listen to, and they just have a conversation back and forth with Lynn as the anxiety expert. She's also based in New Hampshire, which is where I first found out about her. Dan Siegel is, let me see if I can find some of his books down here. Um, Dan Siegel wrote the book, oh my gosh, what's it called? Brainstorm, I think it's called, about the adolescent brain. Dan Siegel has done so much around the adolescent brain and the development of that. He has the Mindsight Institute, and they have a website, and you can learn a lot just on the website. Um, I don't know if anybody is interested in more information about OCD, but there is a really great podcast that I listen to on Spotify called OCD Stories. And there are probably maybe 300 episodes at this point. So you can kind of scroll through, like if you think maybe one of your kids might have OCD, perfectionism, or there's so many categories of OCD. There's the contamination. There can also be religious scrupulosity. There's a lot of compulsions that are internal. So kids can have like obsessive thoughts and then do mental compulsions, so nobody even knows that it's happening. And I've had this happen with certain clients where they'll have a certain thought about, I don't know, school, grades, whatever it is, and then the mental ritual might be going through their mind over and over and over and over again, like their schedule, their homework. Even if they have it written down somewhere, their mind won't release them from it. Or they might feel like they have to count to a certain number or say certain words, and it's all mental. It's all in their mind. And so the work with that is again, it's exposure response prevention, which I can't go too deeply into here, but it really is the kind of the gold seal of working with OCD. With OCD, where's my little OCD book? Sorry, I have books like all over the place. There's a wonderful workbook on OCD. I'm just I'm forgetting the author, so sorry about that. Maybe I can get it back to you later, Anna. But and she has this workbook. Christine Taylor, I think is her name, and you can get it on Amazon. And it's an OCD workbook for kids, and it describes like every type of OCD, and it has checklists of so you can identify if there's some obsessive thoughts or compulsions going on. And then she uses this character called the trickster as the OCD monster, and how the OCD talks to kids, and then kids' response is the fear, and then they believe whatever the thought is to be true. Like, for example, there's a lot of kids that will have OCD thoughts that are like self-harm thoughts. um, I had a client who just had a thought that would pop into his head that, what if I take this knife and stab myself or my mother or something like that? And it completely terrified him because it would just pop up in his mind. And so we had to do a lot of exposure work on that, where we were looking at pictures of knives. We were writing it down. Like, I think his mother couldn't believe I was doing this with him. He would have a thought, I think I'm going to stab someone, and he would have to write it over and over and read it over and over, and he would read it in different accents, and we would put post-its with words all over the wall, and he would read them. And his distress came down so much that these thoughts come in now, and he doesn't even hardly notices them. So it's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Uh, could you repeat the name of the podcast, the first one you recommend, or
Oh,
do you
oh,
want to type in the
oh,
chat?
in the chat. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
there will
yeah,
be.
it is a funny name. Okay. Yeah. Did that come through? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Fluster Clucks.
Oh,
Oh, from me to all panelists.
I can type that for
Oh,
you because
oh,
I'm
okay.
like at home.
Oh, thank you.
So the name.
It's a Fluster Clucks, and that's the Lynn Lyons podcast. She also has a group on uh I have on FaceTime, like a group that talks about, you know, all of this stuff. The
Uh,
podcast name of OCD. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She the podcast of OCD stories. There's another podcast. Oh my gosh. You can type in, like, on Spotify, there's so many. And how I found them was just searching. Um, there's one called the Anxiety Toolkit. That's also really helpful. And you can see what the titles of each episode are. So sometimes I'll start listening to one and I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted to hear. And so I'll just kind of search and see. Most of the people that run these podcasts, like OCD Stories, the person that runs that, he just brings in different guests all the time. So he had Russ Harrison, who talked about ACT therapy. He's had people in who struggled with their own OCD and the work that they had to do to recover. But there's tons of really good podcasts out there. I've kind of been amazed by what I've been finding.
so
Um,
our number two most common question would be, how would you recommend the kids to overcome the video addiction?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough one. Video addiction is a process addiction, so it affects the brain just like a chemical addiction would. So when kids start playing video games, if some kids can manage it and just play for an hour or two and be happy to turn it off, but the same thing happens in the brain during any kind of addiction. Like, uh, the brain cues kids to, to have that craving to play video games. And I guess for those of you who have kids that are playing hours and hours of video game, what I would recommend is really having setting up some boundaries around that, some scheduling around that, because if it's a free for all, like I know one family that their kids have to do certain things before they can play video games. So it's sort of like this is what they get to do at the end of the things they're responsible for, whether it's like exercise, getting their homework done, having dinner with the family. But I work with some college kids that are really, really struggling with that, to the point where sometimes they're playing the game and they don't even want to play anymore, and they can't make themselves stop. So it's really learning how to manage that. And sometimes people will have to completely give them up for a while because they just can't stop themselves from playing, and they realize that they're not really enjoying it anymore. It's more of a, it can become like a chore. But I know that a lot of kids right now, especially during the pandemic, are playing 10, 12 hours of video games a day. That's a lot. And so it's sitting down and talking to them about it, and how it's good to balance their life and to make sure they're doing other things besides video games. It worries me for kids and their brain development, for sure. I don't have a clear, perfect answer for that, because there are some therapists that actually specialize in video game addiction, which has not been a specialty for me. Um, but I think that that's another one that CBT can help with, ACT could help with. But I think being really open with kids and starting to have the conversations about, how much do they think is a healthy amount of video games. And they might go, I don't know, 12 hours. And they go, okay, that's not going to be work for me. Let's see if we can compromise.
And there's two equal vote question. It's how do you recommend to help teenagers to understand how to make like positive friends?
Mm, okay. I probably would want some more clarifying question to that, which would be like, is there a concern about friends that this, child is hanging out with right now that the parent is worried about?
I'm not sure.
I don't know if they can add more
Okay.
to that or not, but
Maybe the person that asked this question want to add more, you can type in the Q&A toolbar on the bottom.
yeah.
And what about how should parents do if their kids never start their work until like really short amount of due time?
Oh, like at the last minute, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another common problem. The other thing with that is like kids who are procrastinating about their homework for hours before they get to it, and getting more and more anxious and more distressed about it. Um, One of the things that I do with clients is I have them, especially when they are really not motivated to do their work. They're not interested. They don't want to do it. I mean, some kids honestly just don't want to do all their schoolwork, and it's really hard to get them to do it. And so, and I think a lot of that has to be put more on the kids, where the teacher would then respond to them instead of the parents feeling like they're responsible for their child to get their homework done. I know I'm guilty of that when I was raising my kids, and I think I definitely talked about homework too much. And I look back on that, and feel like, oh, I wish I would have like just the natural consequence of the teacher saying, hey, where's your homework, right? If they don't turn it in, then the teacher will talk to them about it. But parents can pull their hair out over kids, starting things too late. So one of the things I'll do with kids is, they'll tell me I just don't have any motivation. So we'll kind of look at we'll sit down and go, okay, tell me what you have to do, and then see if they can predict how much time that assignment will take. And then after they do it, write down how much time it actually did take, and then kind of practice that, on a kind of a daily, it doesn't have to be forever, just until they can get back into, realizing how much time something will take. Because I think kids will sometimes think something will take a half an hour, and it could take, you know 5 hours, and now they're panicked, right? So I think sitting down with them and really looking at, you know a calendar. Like, I don't know what age you're talking about, but like, I have kids set up a calendar. A lot of kids that I'm working with have gotten whiteboards in their rooms, and they set up a calendar and they're writing their assignments down, because then they can visually see what they have and what the due dates are. When it's all on this computer, a lot of kids are telling me that they forget to look. And then they go, oh my gosh, I have a math assignment, or I have a chemistry assignment, and it's due tomorrow, and I missed that. So if they could, if it might be helpful for some people to have a whiteboard where they can create their own calendar and check things off and put lines through things and all of that, that would be helpful. And then the other thing I found with kids is that this is a David Burns technique. So David Burns is another author who wrote the book Feeling Good and also Feeling Great, which was just released. So I think that one is only in hardback right now. He does an approach called Team CBT, and he has this exercise where if somebody is really stuck and they just can't get started, where they say to themselves, okay, at 6 o'clock tonight, I'm going to start this assignment and I'm only going to work for 5 minutes. That's it. At the end of 5 minutes, I can stop if I want, or I can continue going. And so most of the time when I've done with this with kids, I'll ask them then to like send me an email and ask me, like, tell me what happened. And most of the time they'll say, I started at 6 and I worked for 5 minutes. And then I realized once I had worked for 5 minutes that I just want to get it done. And so they continue. Every once in a while they'll say, I worked for 5 minutes and I said, that's it. And, so sometimes they're not going to do everything exactly the way that you want them to do, but there are different techniques that they can use to kind of help with motivation like that. But also just having them take a little bit more ownership in, creating their calendar, looking at what they have and how much time they think everything is going to take so that they can manage it better. It's really a time management type of thing,
Mhm.
an executive functioning skill that they have to learn for sure.
And I just got a question that it's more like two, three people asked.
Okay.
So how do you do if how do you get suggest a teen that who is resistant to get to therapy and get
Mm.
help and like talk them through the get them into therapy?
Yeah. Well, this is what I say to kids. Um, in one session, I think you can get kids to go to one session. And whether it's even like if you go to this session, you can get a reward. Do something that is motivating. Like it's more intrinsically motivating for you as parents to get your kids into therapy. So for them, maybe they need something. Maybe they need a reward for going through one session of therapy. I say to kids at my very first session, I always say to them, at the end of this session, you're going to know if you want to work with me, because if this is not interesting to you and you are not into this at all, then then I'm not your person, because I really throw a lot out of the first session. And they'll either come back and go, oh yeah, no, this is good. I try to leave them with something like some tools to take with them from the very first intake, but they really do know. And I think the most important thing, some therapists will give it like 3 or 4 sessions, and that's fine too. Like I'll do that too. But the most important thing is that your child feels comfortable with that therapist. To me, like, people have had lots of different trainings. If there's a licensed therapist, they have done a lot of trainings because they have to keep up with their license. Every 2 years you have to do all these trainings. And so there's a lot of CBT therapists, there's a lot of ACT therapists, but if your child enjoys meeting with that person, because therapy in my mind should be fun. Honestly, I know that sounds weird to some people, but it doesn't have to be this horrible thing. It can be pretty fun. And for a lot of teenagers, they find that talking to somebody outside of their family ends up being super helpful because they're not worried about anything they're saying. So they also learn that, that I am a mandated reporter. So if kids say to me, I'm having suicidal thoughts, or I'm planning on hurting myself, or someone else is hurting me, then I do have to report that. But otherwise, they can be comfortable and they have somebody to talk to. So I would say just like see if they'll go one time. Just try it once instead of thinking, because they might think, oh my gosh, once I get in here, I'm going to have to stay for years. Just see how they do. you can actually accomplish a lot in one session, frankly, if the
Mhm.
person coming in is like wants to do it. So yeah, I don't know if that's is that helpful.
And if there, so you mentioned about like the volcano and the lava
Yeah.
to let them vent out the anger. So is there any like other ways for them to, get that vent out?
Yeah, yeah, get the vent out. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think um, I think that what I try to do with kids is like teach them to recognize when that's coming. So they start to think about the physical symptoms that are going on with them. And they will report, my heart starts beating faster. My breathing changes. Sometimes kids will say, I can hear my heartbeat in my ears. Like that's anxiety. And so if they start to recognize the symptoms of anxiety first, then they can stop. Like I just have them stop what you're doing, sit back, ground yourself, and teaching them skills to ground themselves. There's one called drop the anchor, where it's like they're a boat, on the water, and the water is really calm, and then the wind comes up and the boat starts rocking, right? At that point, if they can stop what they're doing and recognize, like, okay, my anxiety is coming, I need to ground myself, and they push their feet into the floor, their hands into the chair, and give their body some weight, and just slowly slow down their breathing, then they can manage it so it doesn't get to the flipping your lid anger part. So that's the teaching of learning how to manage your emotions. Easier said than done. I will put that out there. A lot of teenagers lose it and they yell a lot or they swear a lot or whatever it is. But once they really learn that it isn't really the anger that's creating this, it's everything
Mm.
underneath it, and we start to learn about that. Sorry, go
Is there
ahead.
like a mindfulness session that you're mentioned, like anchoring and?
Yeah, yeah. Mindfulness is great. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say, mindfulness is in combination with other things. So I really try to encourage kids to bring some mindfulness practice into their day. One of the kids I'm working with now is starting her school day by exercising first. Like she does a little video, like a YouTube video, and it's pretty cute. And then she does a mindfulness practice before she goes on to Zoom, and she said it has helped her so much because it grounds her and gets her to a place where she's ready to focus. What I'm more often hearing is kids are waking up 5 minutes before their first class. I don't know how they do that. I mean, I need an hour.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't. I'm like, how do you do that? And some of them won't put their video on, and they just have
Mhm.
their heads on the desk, and I'm like, yikes. Not a great way to learn. But anyway.
So, is there any book recommendation on time management, executive function?
Oh, wow. Let me think about that. There are books and workbooks on executive functioning skills. I'm trying to think of anything that I really, really love on that. Um, oh, here's the Brainstorm book. This is the Brainstorm book by Dan Siegel. This is great. I love this. It'll help you totally understand your adolescence. Also, wanted to share this one. This is a book by Don Huebner. If you have a middle schooler that's anxious, this book is called Outsmarting Worry. She explains this so well. This is a perfect book for like older elementary kids, like from third grade up to like through middle school. And it's a quick read, but it explains the amygdala and fight, flight, freeze, and it's got great cartoons, and worry is a monster, and it's really good. Um, so with the executive functioning skills, um, you know, I'm not thinking of anything that jumps out right now for executive functioning skills. Let me put a little thought on that, and if I can send you an email later or something about that, I could
Hmm.
do that. Um, but the other thing you can do is look at just kind of look around, like, you know, searching up books and articles and things on executive functioning skills for sure.
So I just mentioned that so after I just record the session, so we will put the recording of the session on our website, and
Okay.
our website link is on the Eventbrite page.
Oh, okay.
And so Julie, you can also send me those like book
Okay.
and podcast list that you recommend to
Okay.
me, and I
Oh,
will
sure.
just organize it, put it up on the
Okay.
website. Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Anna. That's great. That's great. Yeah, and if I have other books that I think would be helpful. Oh, there's another program called the Zones of Regulation, and that is also great for younger kids when they're learning about their emotions and their feelings, and it's based on different colors. So it's to foster self-regulation and emotional control. And so, the green zone is, go, and that's what we try to work for. And there's like things like this: caution, triggers ahead. And kids learn about triggers, and when they're in the blue zone, they're either sleepy, tired, sick, depressed. Green zone is what we shoot for. Yellow is anxiety and frustration, and red is out of control. So they start to recognize, like, the physical symptoms that are going on, the thinking, the feelings that are going on, and how to catch them so that they can step back and do different things to get them back to the green zone, or at least catch them before they get to the red zone. Red zone's not fun.
And there's a question about a kid. He always has panic in death and thinking so helpless when people die,
Yeah.
and he has problems sleeping while he will go into a big hole of hopelessness.
Uh-huh.
So about this death, like how to, be awareness of this death situation.
Right, right. Yeah, it's sometimes kids will just, that automatic thought will pop into their head, like, someday you're going to die, or, well, the pandemic is making a lot of kids very, fearful. Um, so that's getting into, again, the content of the anxiety. And so what I would do with that child is that we want to externalize the thought, and we want to really recognize that it's taking control of him instead of it control of the thought. So I just, I'm wrapping up, like, a series of many therapy sessions with a young lady who had that exact situation. Her mind would say, you're going to die someday. What if you die of COVID? Those kind of things.
Mm.
And so she would have an instant panic attack. And her parents did take her to the ER, I think at least once, maybe twice. And she, the doctor said, you're having a panic attack. So I taught her about the the amygdala. We did a whole section of psychoeducation, which um, she learned so well. And once kids really understand that it's their amygdala that's responding to the thought, so there's no evidence of this thought, it's just that the brain, the nervous system, is responding to it, and it's causing this anxiety. So we she named her fear of death. She gave it a name. She drew a picture of it. We externalized it. And so it used to be, she would have this thought and she would be just frozen in fear in her bedroom, or she would, not be able to breathe and her heart would be racing, and she would, panic. And so we started to send messages through her prefrontal cortex ahead of time and saying, listen, this thought is going to come up. So just expect it, expect that it's going to come. And then when it does come, you just, instead of trying to push it away, which was what most kids do, is try to press it down or push through it or push away. That's what makes the thoughts bigger. So it's like that game, whack-a-mole. It's actually a picture on the front of this book. So that's the worry. And so when you try to, like, make it go away, it just pops up somewhere else and it gets bigger. So we learn how to manage it by just saying, oh, hello, dread, hello, fear of death, hello, worry, hello, anxiety, hello, fear. And that young lady at this point, just last week, I said, do you still have those thoughts? And she said, yes. And I said, now, what is your response to that thought? The thought comes up and she goes, whatever. And she can turn and walk away. So when you are working with this, what you're trying to do is habituate and retrain the amygdala. So right now, with that guy, with the teenager that's having thoughts about death, the amygdala is sending his anxiety up to the top. It's 10 out of 10 panic. So if everyone reacts around him like, oh my God, then the panic is going to be there. Or if he's seeking a lot of reassurance, that's the other thing that's important. A lot of times when kids have thoughts like that, they'll seek reassurance from their parents. And the parents, because they're loving and caring, will reassure them. Then their anxiety will come right down and they'll be okay for a little bit, but it doesn't change anything. The thought comes in again, the anxiety goes up to a panic attack. And then the parent says, don't worry, it's all good, it's all fine, you're going to be fine. Anxiety comes down. So what happens is the reassurance is accommodating the anxiety. It's helping it to stay there. And not to make anyone feel bad, I did the same thing with my kids. I had no idea, that I was helping their worries stay alive when I had that kind of reaction. So instead, you can respond to it by saying, it sounds like you're having some really, really strong, thoughts, or your worries coming up, that's really, really hard. So we have to like recognize that the amygdala has taken control, and you expect it, you let the thought come in, you welcome it in. All thoughts, all feelings are welcome. And then you decide if you're going to let it just move on out again. One analogy I like is like you're standing on a platform at a train station, and you decide which train you want to get on. And one train is worry, one train is thoughts about death, one train is thoughts about perfection. And or so you jump on and you ride that worry all the way to as far as it's going to go, or you decide to let it go by and not allow yourself to believe what it's saying, if that helps. It takes practice though. I'm just saying that when this comes up, it takes like daily practice of the work to challenge it and to change your response to it.
Yeah, I remember my previous therapy also said to me that he used like a bouncing ball as an example, that anxiety come if you try to push it back, and they will like hit the ball and bounce back to you. So
Right.
you're
Yeah.
more like just calm down because you cannot worry about future things that you cannot change or
Right.
you cannot predict. So
Right.
you would just be mindful and just let those feelings float here.
Yep. Yep.
You can, observe that as a outsider.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like you just start to notice it. So you would say, I'm noticing that I'm having this thought.
Mhm.
Not that the thought is just you as a human being. It's like, I'm noticing this thought. You expect that the thought's going to come, you let it come in, and then you take action. You decide how you're going to respond to it. So you change your response to it, just like what you were saying, Anna. It's, you know everybody tries at first to just like, I can't stand that thought, push it away. But you welcome it as, like, this is part of the ACT work. It's like all of our thoughts and feelings are passengers on in our life. One of my kids that I work with right now, she created this wonderful example of this, where she called it the emotions on the bus. And she drew a school bus, and then she created all these characters that make her feeling anxious, like Mr. Swirly Head, and there were all these different names. And she drew pictures of all of these different emotions. And then when she's trying to do schoolwork, when one of these emotions takes over, whether it's anger or it's stress or anxiety or frustration, she puts that character, it's like she drew on a piece of cardboard, in the driver's seat. And that way, like when her mom looks over, she can see that she's not in the driver's seat. so then she can talk to that character and say, listen, Mr. Swirly Head, you need to get in the back seat because I really want to get my work done, so get in the back. But not to say that you're going to push them away. They're always going to be passengers
Mhm.
in our life, for sure.
So I think there's one last question.
Okay.
What about a super smart kid refuses to learn at all at school because he thinks it's useless when looking for work?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good one. I how old is this? How old is this
I'm not sure.
guy? um, yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is just like family expectations, and just having those kind of conversations that, if this child is interested in going to college, then I think that you sit down and have the conversation of why they're doing what they're doing. There needs to be some value in it for them too, like figuring out what their buy-in is. Um, I don't really know. I'd have to get to know this person. It's pretty particular, so I'd have to get to know this person and like really see what all the thinking is behind this. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on how the messages
Oh,
he's
15-year old.
yeah, yeah. So like, I would ask questions like, what are the messages that he has, you know, taken in from external sources? Where is he getting this belief system? Um, are there classes in school that would challenge him more, or is he digging his heels in and just refusing to do, any kind of schoolwork? Um, so you know, that's a tricky one for sure. So like I said, some kids will just say, I'm not doing it. You can also contact the school to see if you can get some support, and maybe you've already done that, so I don't know. It's a pretty specific question, but um, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for sure. And I would also say, you could sit down and do an activity with your son where you ask him, let's look at the advantages of going to school and getting a high school diploma, and then if there's any disadvantages of going to school and get a high school diploma, so that he can really differentiate between, why am I in school? What is the purpose? He's got to understand what the heck he's going to school for. Um, and, that could help kind of open up, that's some CBT work. A lot of that is in David Byrne's book, Feeling Good, or Feeling Great. But, when people get really stuck in their thinking, they have to sit back a little bit and view it from um, a flexible place. What your child is doing is has very, very rigid thinking. And so he's not really stepping back and opening up his mind and seeing other perspectives. So if he's very rigid and saying, this is it, I'm not doing this, I'm too smart for school, then we got to teach him how to like look at this from different perspectives and see the value of his diploma and what he's expecting to do with it when he graduates. Maybe he never wants to go to college, and so he's not as motivated. But if he does, then he may want to think a little bit more about what would be the advantages of actually doing my work.
I think this also could link back to the previous question about making positive friends. So
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
whenever you answer
uh,
that.
the kid
Yeah.
just like friends who play games. So the most interesting him to play with other friends would just because they play the same game.
Oh,
So he
yeah.
make friends who play the same game with him.
Like video games, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, video
Yeah.
yeah. So how
Yeah.
can he, if he already has this mindset,
Yeah.
how can he learn to, get out of that comfort zone of him
Yeah.
and choose of like another type of friend?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's also good to look at like what are his other interests besides video games, and like who are the kids that he is connected to in those other activities. I know, again, where kids aren't getting together right now, so it's a little tricky. If we didn't have the pandemic, then what I would do is see what else he's interested in and get him involved. in something, some other kind of activity, whether it's a sport or music or whatever it is. And that way he would meet other friends that are doing, more diverse kind of things. um, and I would also break down like the same kind of exercise of, if he's playing video games with kids, if you have some concerns, like when you hear, because I have to say that sometimes when kids are playing video games, um, some of them really love to get on there and like, what do they call it? That they're like yelling at each other, they're swearing at each other, putting each other down. What do they call that? Something talk. Anyway, and some kids are into that and they're like, they think it's fun, but some kids, it actually really affects them. They feel bad, or they get off and they don't feel very good. So I would kind of watch for that and just say, what are the what do you like about these friends, and is there anything that you dislike about these friends? Is there anything that makes you feel uncomfortable about them? And just kind of seeing, because if there's a whole group playing, they're all going to have different personalities. So it some of the kids that he's playing games with could be great no matter what they
Mhm.
they play. So yeah.
Is that trash talk
Yeah,
you're
trash talk.
thinking?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just dated myself. I'm like, we used to call it something else, but I can't say it online. But
Yeah.
yeah, trash talk. Yeah, there's a lot of trash talk that goes on in video games. It's amazing. And I have one client that doesn't like it. He
Mhm.
wants to play the game, but he's a really sensitive kid, and so when his friends start yelling at him because he shot the wrong character or something, he gets really upset. Not about the game, but about what his friends are saying, and that's the social anxiety that kicks
Yeah.
in. So
I
yeah.
think it's hard to not to take it personally when you are in the age of like,
Yeah.
you focus on the pressure like a peer,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah, middle
yeah,
school and high school is rough, especially middle school. That's a tough time, when kids are developing their self-confidence, and their self-esteem can get just, destroyed
crushed
by
by
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it. I don't want anyone yelling at me and swearing at me like that, So it's an interesting uh it's an interesting social, situation that's gone on, but
So if it's hard to prevent, you just like, like as we talk, like you just anchor yourself and
yeah.
try to be
Yeah.
mindful.
Yeah, definitely. And try to tell yourself ahead of time that there's that front loading of, I'm going to play
Yeah.
video games with my friends tonight. They're probably going to be really mean to me, but I'm not going to take it personally. This is how they play, this isn't about me. It's just about, talk
The
about flipping.
character.
Yeah, yeah, and talk about flipping your lid, right? When they get mad because one of the kids on their team missed something, oh my God, everybody's flipping their lid and they're not thinking clearly, and they're just like saying stuff that's like trash talk.
Mhm.
It hurts my heart.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mm.
all right. So you think we should wrap it up at this point?
Yeah, I think there's no other question. One question
Okay.
about like, did you recommend the kid like a punching bag for his anger? But I think we covered that with the how do you recommend to vent out the.
Right. Well, and also exercise, I mean, any
Mhm.
kind of physical exercise. Some kids need to move, so it isn't like, for some kids, sitting and doing mindfulness is also very calming, but don't forget the child that has to move physically in order to sort of get rid of some of that anxiety. Kids that need to run around, or I tell kids, just put on some music and dance it out, and a lot of them do, like in their room, and they're just like, dancing like no one's watching, going for a run or a bike ride or a walk or
Mhm.
something. But exercise can be critical for kids, and if they're not, when they're in school, they're getting PE or their
Yeah.
recess, and they're not moving the way that they were, and they need it. They definitely need it. We all need it. Don't you
Mhm.
all need to exercise? I mean, gosh, it's
Um,
helpful.
one person just said that, can I ask more about resilience?
Okay. Yep.
How,
What's the question?
uh, so it's about how can you help kids to build like a resilience
Okay.
skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of like half of our resilience is really based on our mindset. So, um, the I think that kids need to learn they need to learn how to problem solve. And when they do learn how to problem solve, and they can, and sometimes with help from parents, like sitting down and saying, okay, let's figure out how to solve this problem. Um, Once they start to learn how to do this and they again are opening their mind to how can I figure these things out, the more they learn how to problem solve, the stronger they become internally, and that's going to build their resilience skills. So it's a lot about, how much are their thoughts affecting them, and you know how much can they challenge those thoughts, and so just like really learning how to break things down and
Mhm.
do some step-by-step problem solving can really help, um, with their resilience getting stronger internally.
So it's more like if you have this anxious anxiety thought, you would just be like, why? And break down to why this thought, why, and
Oh
try to,
yeah. Well,
is that
I don't
more?
know.
Mhm.
That's like getting into the content more, but like it's really practicing that process of externalizing it, and
Mhm.
recognizing it. Like, I see you there. I see that you're there. Welcome, welcome. But then also you have to learn how to sit with the discomfort of it for a little while. So a lot of times when people are externalizing their thoughts or their feelings, um, it's not that your anxiety is just going to disappear, but you learn how to sit with that discomfort. And
Mhm.
if you sit with it, it will come down. It might take 20 minutes or a half an hour, but then the next time you do it again, and you start to do a different process where you're managing the anxiety instead of getting into the content, like like a kid that might be afraid of a dog, that's getting into the content. We want to like look at that and figure out how do we expose this child to a dog, because you can't expect people to keep dogs away from this child for the rest of their life, because dogs are
Mhm.
everywhere. And so you start working slowly and stepping into things so that they can learn how to build their own strength and resilience. So it might be looking at pictures of dogs, and then meeting somebody who or knowing someone that has a really sweet and gentle dog, and introducing them, and then giving them rewards and things for actually doing it. Lynn Lyons tells a hilarious story. I forget, so on something that I listened to of hers, where this kid, there were all these dogs that people were prepared to like have him meet, and every time he pet a dog, he would get a candy bar or something. At the end of the thing, he had like 8 candy bars or something. So,
Wow.
rewards can help.
Definitely. So
Anyway,
I think we will just wrap it up here.
okay,
And people ask about question, like a book suggestion about
okay,
uh the this resilient list you said, but I think you could just put all the lists to
yeah,
me, and I
okay,
will just upload them to our website. Yeah.
yeah,
So there will
yeah,
be recordings and also book and podcast
okay,
lists.
yep,
Yeah, I will upload them
okay.
soon.
I'm
So
just
stay
gonna
tuned
say
with
that.
the
Yeah,
from our website. And I just typed the website link in the chatting room,
okay,
and also you can also find the website on Eventbrite. We put that on the registration page. Yeah.
okay, okay, great.
So thank you, Julie, for this
Yes, thank you,
session.
Anna.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was really nice. It was nice to be
And
up on the screen with you.
yeah,
Thank you for being next
so
to me.
it's just like us talking. Yeah.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. All
So
right,
thank you,
well,
all the
yep.
audience.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
thank you everybody, and it was fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Good night. Have a good night.
All right, good
Bye
night.
bye.
Bye.